Human catches the falling alien girl on a cliff edge, and the alien girl says the wind recognized him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Michael stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind howling fiercely around him. The sky was dark, filled with ominous clouds that seemed to be drawn into a swirling vortex. He could feel the weight of the storm coming closer, the air thick with tension. Michael adjusted his backpack and squinted into the distance, trying to find the path that led back down to safety. It had been a long hike, but this was the last stretch. He was just about to turn back when he heard a sound, faint at first, like a rush of wind. But then it grew louder, and Michael's instincts screamed at him to turn around. His eyes widened as he saw her. A figure, falling from the sky. A woman, or something like it, tumbling through the air, her body twisting helplessly. Time seemed to slow down. Without thinking, Michael ran forward, his heart pounding. He reached out just in time, his hands grabbing hold of her wrist. For a brief moment, he thought he might be too late, that he would both fall into the abyss below. But then, with a sharp tug, he pulled her up, just enough to keep them both from disaster. The woman's eyes fluttered open, and she gasped for breath. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and curiosity, as though she had never seen a human before. Michael's mind raced, trying to process the impossible situation he was in. He had just saved an alien. She blinked, taking in her surroundings as if she couldn't quite understand where she was. The storm raged around them, the wind howling through the cliffside, but she seemed unfazed by the chaos. "Who are you?" Michael asked, his voice shaky, still trying to catch his breath from the exertion of the rescue. The alien girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up at the sky, then back at him. "The wind," she said, her voice soft yet strangely certain. "The wind recognized you." Michael's confusion deepened. "The wind recognized me?" he repeated, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. She nodded slowly. "Yes, the wind knows things. It knows when it's time." Her words hung in the air like a cryptic riddle, leaving Michael with more questions than answers. Who was this strange girl? And why had the wind recognized him? As the storm continued to howl around them, Michael knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning of an encounter that would change everything. Michael stood there, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts, still trying to wrap his mind around what had just happened. He had caught an alien girl falling from the sky, a sentence that, even in his mind, felt absurd. The wind howled fiercely around them, but it felt like the storm was pushing them together, urging them to communicate. He held her wrist gently, his fingers still tingling from the force of the rescue. The alien girl, or at least what he thought was an alien, looked at him with wide, curious eyes, as though trying to understand him just as much as he was trying to understand her. Her hair, wild and tousled by the wind, shimmered under the stormy sky, a strange, almost otherworldly glow to it. "The wind knows when it's time," she repeated, her voice soft yet filled with an undeniable certainty. Michael still didn't understand. "What do you mean? What time?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She tilted her head, her gaze drifting back to the sky as if searching for something. "The time when paths cross," she said cryptically. "You are the one who will guide me." Michael blinked, confused. "Guide you? What do you mean?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him more intently now, as if she were studying him. The wind whipped around them, but she seemed unfazed by it, her presence almost calm in contrast to the chaos of the storm. Michael felt an uneasy chill crawl up his spine. He had no idea who she was, where she came from, or why she had fallen from the sky. "Where did you come from?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if the answer might be something too impossible to hear. "From a place beyond the stars," she answered, her voice distant, as though her thoughts were elsewhere. "A place where the wind carries more than air. It carries messages. It carries fate." Michael shook his head, trying to make sense of her words. Nothing made sense. He had hiked these cliffs countless times, never once thinking he would meet someone, something, so far removed from his understanding of the world. He looked around, trying to figure out what to do next. The storm was only getting worse, the wind now driving rain against his face. "We need to get out of here," Michael said, his tone more urgent now. He could feel the edge of the cliff beneath them shifting, the ground trembling beneath his feet. She didn't respond, still lost in her thoughts. Michael gently pulled her to her feet, steadying her against the wind. "Come on," he urged. "I can't leave you out here. It's too dangerous." The alien girl finally nodded, though her expression remained unreadable. As they began moving, the storm seemed to rage even more fiercely, as if it were pushing them in a certain direction. Michael couldn't help but feel that the wind was guiding them, just as she had said. Every step felt like they were being led towards something. But what that something was, he couldn't say. "Where are we going?" he asked, glancing at her, but she didn't answer. The storm continued to howl around them, the wind tugging at them as if it had a will of its own. Michael kept his grip firm on her wrist, guiding her through the treacherous cliffs, his thoughts racing with questions he couldn't ask. What was she? Why was she here? And what did she mean by fate and the wind knows? The answers were nowhere to be found, but one thing was certain. The storm wasn't going to let them go until they reached whatever destination it had in mind. The storm continued to rage around them as Michael guided the alien girl through the treacherous cliffs. The wind howled fiercely, but strangely, it didn't seem to bother her. She walked with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the violent forces of nature surrounding them. Every gust of wind seemed to push them forward, as though they were being pulled in a certain direction. Michael tried to focus, his thoughts racing with questions he couldn't quite form into words. The girl beside him, Aliana, walked with purpose, but her eyes were distant, as though she was listening to something he couldn't hear. He glanced at her, trying to understand what she was thinking, but all he saw was a look of quiet determination on her face. "Where are we going?" he asked again, his voice strained from the cold and the constant battering of the wind. She didn't answer right away, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. The clouds above them seemed to shift and swirl in ways that made no sense, as if they were being guided by some unseen force. Finally, Aliana turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "The wind will show us the way," she said, her eyes meeting his for the first time since they started walking. Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. Her words were cryptic, but they carried a weight that felt important. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led to something that was beyond his comprehension. The path they were following grew steeper, and the wind seemed to grow stronger with each step. The cliffside was becoming more treacherous, the rocks slippery with rain, and Michael had to be extra careful as they moved forward. Aliana, however, moved with an ease that seemed unnatural, her feet barely touching the ground as she seemed to glide over the uneven terrain. Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he watched her. She wasn't just surviving the storm, she was in harmony with it. The wind seemed to carry her, guiding her movements. Michael felt small in comparison, just a man struggling against the elements, while Aliana moved as though she was part of the storm itself. The air around them grew heavier, thick with energy, and Michael could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The storm wasn't just a storm anymore. It felt like something more, like they were walking into the eye of a much bigger, much more powerful force. "We're almost there," Aliana said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. Her voice was calm, but there was a sense of urgency beneath it. Since that time was running out. Michael didn't know what she meant, but he felt it too, an inexplicable pull, as though they were reaching the end of something. As they approached the edge of the cliff, Michael's heart began to race. He could see something up ahead, faint in the distance, a glowing light through the mist. It was faint at first, like a small beacon, but as they got closer, it grew brighter. The wind picked up, whipping around them in a frenzy, but Aliana didn't flinch. She kept moving forward, her eyes locked on the light. Michael followed her, his footsteps heavy in the thickening fog. The closer they got, the more the air seemed to hum with energy. It was as if they were stepping into another world, one that was both alien and familiar at the same time. The light ahead grew stronger, and Michael could feel the tension building in the air. They were almost there. Whatever was waiting for them at the end of this journey, Michael didn't know, but he couldn't turn back now. The storm had brought them here, and now they were about to discover what it had been leading them to. The light ahead grew brighter as Michael and Aliana pressed forward, their steps now more urgent as the wind howled around them. The storm had reached a fever pitch, the sky crackling with energy, but the strange pull they felt toward the light seemed to drown out the chaos of the world around them. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, every instinct telling him to turn back, to seek shelter, but something kept him moving forward. Aliana moved ahead with grace, unfazed by the storm, her eyes locked on the glowing light in the distance. She seemed to know exactly where she was going. Michael tried to keep up, but the path grew steeper, the wind tearing at his clothes, making every step a challenge. He reached out, gripping a rock for support, and glanced at Aliana. "What is it? What's waiting for us?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the wind. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him with a strange intensity, her gaze piercing through the storm. "It's the place where the wind leads," she said softly, as though that explained everything. "It's where everything changes." Michael didn't fully understand, but he could feel something shifting in the air around them. It was as if they were getting closer to something important, something that had been set into motion long before they arrived. The light ahead began to take shape, revealing a massive structure emerging from the fog. It wasn't a building in the traditional sense, but more of a formation, as if the land itself had risen up to form something ancient and powerful. The structure was made of smooth stone, etched with patterns that seemed to shift and change as they approached. It almost looked alive, breathing in time with the wind. Michael stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. The sight before him was otherworldly, something he had never seen before, even in his wildest dreams. Aliana slowed her pace, sensing his hesitation. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "The place where the wind carries us." Michael could feel the energy in the air, thick and heavy, like a storm that had yet to break. He had no idea what he was about to walk into, but there was no turning back now. He glanced at Aliana, who was already moving toward the structure, her movements fluid and determined. He followed her, his mind racing with questions. The closer they got, the more he could feel the strange pull intensifying. It was as though the earth beneath them was alive, resonating with the energy of the wind. As they reached the base of the structure, Michael could see that the stone was etched with intricate symbols, patterns that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Aliana stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch the stone. The moment her fingers made contact, the air around them seemed to vibrate, and a low hum filled the space. Michael took a step back, watching in awe as the symbols on the stone began to shift and change, glowing brighter with each passing second. Aliana turned to him, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "It's happening," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is where the wind's journey ends, and where it begins again." Michael had no idea what that meant, but he could feel the air crackling with power, the storm outside now distant and quiet, as though the world was holding its breath. What would happen next? He couldn't say, but one thing was certain. They had arrived at the heart of something ancient, something beyond his understanding, and the winds were ready to reveal what they had been waiting for. The air around them pulsed with energy as Aliana's hand remained on the stone. Michael stood frozen, his eyes locked on the symbols that were shifting and glowing with an almost otherworldly light. The sound that had filled the air was deep, almost like a hum from the core of the earth itself. It was as if the very ground beneath them was coming alive, responding to Aliana's touch. Slowly, the structure began to shift. The stones at their feet rumbled faintly, and the symbols that had once been faintly glowing now blazed with a bright, ethereal light. Michael's heart raced as he stepped closer to Aliana, his curiosity fighting against the strange fear that had begun to stir within him. "What is happening?" he asked, his voice almost lost in the strange hum of the air. Aliana's face was illuminated by the glowing symbols, and she smiled, a soft, almost serene smile. "The wind is waking," she said, her voice filled with awe. "This is the moment of transition." Michael didn't understand, but he could feel the power in the air growing stronger. The world around them seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the light, the hum, and the pulsing energy that was drawing them in. Aliana stepped back slightly, and Michael instinctively followed her lead, his feet shifting on the stone beneath him. As he stepped back, the ground beneath them trembled, and Michael had to steady himself to keep from losing his balance. The stone in front of them continued to glow brighter, and the patterns etched into the surface shifted with rapid, fluid motion. It was like watching the very fabric of reality twist and bend. "What happens now?" Michael asked again, unable to hide the nervousness in his voice. Aliana didn't answer at first. She was watching the light, her expression focused and intense, as though she was seeing something Michael couldn't. Finally, she turned to him. "Now, we let the wind carry us," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was something in her tone that made Michael's stomach twist with uncertainty. Aliana stepped forward again, her hand still resting on the stone. This time, Michael didn't hesitate. He followed her, unsure of what was about to happen, but feeling an undeniable pull toward whatever lay ahead. As Aliana's fingers made contact with the glowing stone once more, the air around them shimmered, and Michael felt a sudden rush of energy. The ground beneath him seemed to vanish, and for a split second, he thought he might fall. But then, the world shifted. It was as if they had moved beyond the physical world, into something else entirely. The wind was no longer a force pushing against them. It was something more, something vast and powerful. It surrounded them, embraced them. The hum that had filled the air grew louder, and Michael could feel it vibrating deep within his chest. He looked around, but there was nothing familiar. The landscape was gone. The storm had faded into nothingness, replaced by a vast expanse of swirling colors and light. Aliana's hand was still on the stone, and the light from it was now a beacon, a guide in the void that surrounded them. "Where are we?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible in the strange space. Aliana turned to him, her eyes bright with an intensity that Michael couldn't fully grasp. "We are where the wind meets the stars," she said, her voice filled with reverence. "We are standing at the threshold of what is and what could be." Michael's heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel the weight of her words settling on him like a heavy blanket. This was no ordinary place, no ordinary moment. This was something ancient, something powerful, and he was a part of it. As the wind swirled around them, Michael knew that whatever was happening, whatever was coming next, would change everything. There was no going back now. They were no longer just two people on a cliff, battling a storm. They had crossed into something much greater, and the wind was leading them forward. The world around Michael was no longer a place he recognized. The storm, the cliffs, the earth he had known, all of it had faded into a vast, swirling void. Colors danced in the air, shifting and changing like liquid light. The sensation was like being caught between worlds, a place where nothing was solid, and yet everything felt strangely real. He looked around, his mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. There were no stars, no moon, no sky, only an endless expanse of light and swirling energy. Aliana stood beside him, her expression calm, as though she were perfectly at ease in this bizarre, otherworldly realm. She didn't seem surprised, didn't seem afraid. She was here like she had always been, as if this was the place she belonged. Michael couldn't help but feel small in comparison. His mind raced, still unable to grasp what he was experiencing. He had followed Aliana, followed the wind, but now that they were here, he was unsure of what to do next. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice quiet but filled with awe. Aliana turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly in the strange light. "This is where the wind carries all things," she replied, her voice echoing softly, as if it were part of the very atmosphere around them. "It's the space between moments, the place where what is and what could be meet." Michael furrowed his brow, trying to understand. "Between moments?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "Between the past and the future. Between what you know and what you don't. It's the space where all possibilities exist, waiting to unfold." Michael could feel the weight of her words, but they only left him with more questions. "And what does it mean for us? Why are we here?" Aliana stepped forward, her movements graceful and fluid, as though she were one with the light around them. "You're here because the wind brought you. It's chosen you, Michael." Her words were steady, as if she had known all along that this moment would come. "The wind has carried you to this place for a reason. It's waiting for you to understand." Michael's heart raced. He had never felt more out of place in his life. He was a man of the earth, and yet here he was, standing in a space that defied all logic. The storm he had known, the cliff he had climbed, the world he had left behind, None of it seemed to matter now. The only thing that mattered was the weight of Aliana's words. "What does the wind want from me?" he asked, the question leaving his lips before he could stop it. Aliana's gaze softened. "It wants you to see what you've never seen before, to understand what you could never understand." She turned away from him and began walking, the swirling light parting before her as she moved. Michael hesitated for a moment before following her. The air around them hummed with a strange energy, and every step they took seemed to carry them deeper into this unknown space. The further they walked, the more Michael felt as though the very fabric of reality was shifting. "Come," Aliana called back to him. "The wind will show you what you need to see." Michael followed, feeling the pull of her words. He didn't know what lay ahead, but the wind, the energy in the air, seemed to promise something profound, something that would change him forever. As they continued walking through the vast expanse, Michael could sense the subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was as though they were moving toward a destination, one that held the key to understanding everything that had led him here. And for the first time since this strange journey began, Michael felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just a man caught in a storm. He was part of something much larger, something that had been set in motion long before he had ever set foot on these cliffs. The wind had chosen him. And now, it was time for him to understand why. The light around Michael and Aliana began to shift, the colors in the air swirling with an increasing intensity. As they walked, the space seemed to fold around them, drawing them toward an unknown destination. Michael felt as though the very ground beneath his feet was shifting, though he could still feel the firm stone underfoot. The sensation was disorienting, but with each step, he felt an overwhelming sense of inevitability. They were moving closer to something he couldn't quite grasp yet. Aliana moved ahead with unwavering purpose, her gaze focused on the horizon of light ahead. Michael quickened his pace to keep up with her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what lay ahead, but the air around him hummed with a strange energy, as if something extraordinary was about to unfold. "Aliana," he called out, his voice barely audible against the growing hum. "What is all this? What does the wind want from me?" Aliana didn't stop, but her voice reached him, steady and calm. "The wind doesn't want anything from you, Michael. It simply carries you. It has brought you here, to this moment, because you are ready to understand." Michael's brow furrowed in confusion. "Understand what?" "Understand the connection between all things," she replied, her voice echoing as though the air itself was carrying her words. "The wind doesn't just carry air. It carries the stories of the universe, the paths that are yet to be walked. It carries everything that has happened and everything that will happen." The more she spoke, the more Michael felt like he was on the edge of a revelation he couldn't fully comprehend. He had always been just a man, a simple man from Earth, a man who lived for the moment and never thought much about the larger picture. But now, in this strange place, the larger picture seemed impossible to ignore. "And what is my place in all of this?" he asked, his voice a mix of awe and uncertainty. Aliana stopped walking for a moment and turned to face him. "You are a part of the story, Michael, just like everyone. But your story is tied to this place, to this moment. The wind has chosen you because you have the potential to see beyond what is visible, to understand what lies beneath the surface." Michael felt his pulse quicken. Was she saying that he, a simple man, could understand things that had always eluded him? Could he truly see beyond the physical world? "What do you mean, see beyond?" he asked, his voice trembling. Aliana's eyes shone in the dim light as she answered. "The wind does not only show us what is. It shows us what could be. It reveals the paths not yet taken, the choices that have not been made. It shows us the future and the past, all at once." Michael swallowed, trying to process her words. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Aliana reached out and touched his shoulder gently, her touch warm and reassuring. "You are ready, Michael. The wind has carried you here for a reason. All you need to do now is listen." Michael's heart beat loudly in his chest, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had been chosen. The wind had brought him to this moment, and now, it was time for him to understand. As he stood there, in the center of this swirling light, Michael felt something shift within him. It was subtle, like a whisper in his mind, but it was enough. He could feel it, the connection between him and everything around him. The wind, the space, the energy, it was all part of the same thing. And for the first time, Michael felt like he was a part of something much larger than himself. The air around them began to pulse with energy, and Michael knew that the time had come for him to understand what the wind had been leading him to. He took a deep breath, his mind quieting as he opened himself to whatever was about to unfold. The hum in the air grew louder as Michael closed his eyes, breathing deeply. The light around him flickered, like 1,000 tiny stars twinkling in the distance. For a moment, he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do next. The wind, the energy, everything was a blur of sensation, overwhelming and vast. But as he stood there, Aliana's words echoed in his mind. The wind has brought you here for a reason. All you need to do now is listen. He had tried to understand her before, but now, with the air buzzing around him, he could almost hear something. A whisper just beyond his reach, a sound carried on the breeze. Slowly, almost instinctively, Michael extended his hand. He wasn't sure what he was reaching for, but it felt like the right thing to do. As his fingertips stretched out, the light seemed to grow brighter, swirling around his hand, responding to his touch. The wind shifted, its sound changing, deepening. Aliana stood motionless beside him, her gaze unwavering. "This is what the wind has been leading you to," she said softly. "It is not a thing you can control, but something that you must understand." Michael felt the ground beneath his feet begin to shift. It wasn't a physical change, but a deeper, almost imperceptible alteration in the space around him. The air was filled with the weight of something ancient, and he felt an odd sensation in his chest, like something was stirring inside of him, waiting to awaken. His hand moved closer to the light, and with it, the energy around him seemed to focus. The swirling colors and patterns in the air slowed, coming into sharper focus. Michael's heart raced, the pulse in his veins quickening. He could feel it now, the connection between him and everything. The wind wasn't just a force of nature. It was alive, a living thread that tied the universe together. It carried the past, the present, and the future, weaving them into a tapestry of existence. His mind began to understand, piece by piece, what Aliana had meant. The wind showed him not just what was, but what could be. He could see the possibilities, the countless paths that had yet to be walked. For the first time in his life, Michael felt a sense of clarity, as though the fog in his mind was lifting. The connection he felt was deep, profound, and he realized that he was a part of something greater than himself. Aliana stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. "Do you see now?" she asked. Michael nodded slowly, his hand still outstretched, as the wind swirled around him, carrying the energy of countless possibilities. "I see," he whispered, his voice barely audible. And in that moment, he understood. The wind had brought him here to see the truth, that everything was connected. Every choice, every moment, every breath was part of the same eternal flow. The wind, he now realized, wasn't just a force. It was the fabric of reality itself. As Michael absorbed this knowledge, the space around him seemed to shift again, the colors swirling with greater intensity. The light grew brighter, and the hum of the air vibrated deeper within him. He wasn't just standing in this place anymore. He was becoming part of it. The realization washed over him like a wave, a tide of understanding and purpose. He was no longer just a man on a cliff, caught in a storm. He was part of something far bigger, far older, and far more powerful than he could have ever imagined. And as the wind carried the weight of the universe around him, Michael knew that his journey was far from over. It had only just begun. As the wind swirled around him, Michael felt an overwhelming sense of unity with the energy that filled the space. The light that surrounded him was no longer just a visual phenomenon. It was something he could feel, something that hummed within him, vibrating in harmony with his very being. He could hear it now, the sound of the universe itself, the pulse of existence, like the heartbeat of the earth. The ground beneath his feet was no longer solid. It was fluid, shifting, as if the fabric of reality was in constant motion, folding and unfolding with each passing moment. Michael took a slow breath, trying to center himself, to make sense of the torrent of sensations that flooded his mind. "What happens now?" he whispered, unsure if the words were meant for Aliana or for himself. Aliana stood beside him, her eyes closed, as though she, too, was feeling the deep pulse of the world around them. She opened her eyes and turned to face him, her gaze steady and filled with an ancient wisdom that Michael could not fully comprehend. "Now, you will see it all," she said softly, her voice a soothing presence amidst the swirling energy. "You will see the threads that connect all things." Michael frowned, still trying to grasp what she meant. "The threads? What are you talking about?" "The wind carries more than just air," Aliana explained. "It carries the moments of every life, every choice, every path taken. Everything is connected by these invisible threads. The wind shows us how we are all woven together." Michael's heart quickened as he tried to visualize what she was saying. The wind, the energy, the colors, the hum, it was all so much. He was a man who had never even thought about the bigger picture before, but now, it felt like he was being shown something vast, something that reached beyond his understanding. The wind howled again, and Michael could feel its pull, like it was urging him to step forward. "Are you ready?" Aliana asked, her voice both comforting and expectant. "This is your moment. The wind has brought you here for a reason. It's time for you to see." Michael nodded, unsure of what to expect, but trusting the energy that seemed to flow through him, trusting the sense of purpose that had settled deep in his chest. Slowly, he stepped forward, his hand outstretched toward the light that shimmered ahead. As his fingers touched the air, it rippled, like the surface of water disturbed by a stone. And then, suddenly, the world around him began to shift. He felt himself moving, but he wasn't walking. It was as though time and space were bending. And Michael was traveling along a new path, one that didn't follow the rules of the world he knew. The colors around him became more vibrant, more vivid, each one representing a different thread in the grand tapestry of existence. He could see flashes of moments, glimpses of lives unfolding, choices being made, paths crossing in the most unexpected of ways. It was like watching the world from above, seeing how everything was connected, how every person, every action, no matter how small, played a part in the greater whole. Michael's breath caught in his throat as he realized the magnitude of what he was witnessing. He was seeing the infinite potential of every moment, every choice that had been made, every possibility yet to come. The wind whispered around him, carrying the weight of time, and Michael understood. He understood that the wind was not just a force of nature. It was the conduit through which the universe revealed its secrets, the silent guide that connected all things, past, present, and future. He was part of it, a thread in the vast, intricate web that spanned the fabric of reality. And as he stood there, in the midst of this incredible revelation, Michael knew that his journey had only just begun. The wind had brought him to this moment, but it was up to him to decide what to do with the knowledge he had gained. The choices were his to make, and the wind would carry him wherever he chose to go.